Welcome to the South Australian Drought Hub podcast, strengthening drought resilience for our farmers and regional communities.
Pastoral properties and rotational grazing are phrases that aren't used all that often in the same sentence, largely because the properties are so vast that the fencing needed is financially prohibitive. G'day, I'm Drew Radford, and despite the costs and logistics involved, this was exactly the approach taken by James Kerr, manager at Buckleboo Station on Northern Eyre Peninsula. James decided this was key to making the property more drought resilient. To discuss what was involved and a range of other changes made, James joins me for this SA Drought Hub podcast. Thanks for your time.
Great to be here, Drew.
James, Buckleboo, for those that don't know, where is it and how big is it and what are you running on it?
Thank you, Drew. Buckleboo Station is 54 kilometres northwest of Kimber. We're 250,000 acres or 986 square kilometres. The station is running dorper ewes. At this stage, our numbers are down a bit after the drought, but we're running about 8,000 sheep on the property in total at the moment.
So about 8,000. You've got records, I understand, that go back over 100 years. When did you come onto the property?
I started at Buckleboo 4.5 years ago.
So you've seen hard times there.
We have. The last almost three out of those 4.5 years were pretty severe drought. To best summarise that is that we've come out of a dry cycle. In that dry cycle, our rainfall was below average. Our rainfall for Buckleboo, 100-year average is 322 millimetres. In 2017, 2018, 2019, we were well below that 100-year average. So we did see a situation where all our dams were dry. 35 dams on the station were dry. We carted water. We spent over $200,000 just carting water to the livestock. And it was a situation where I took over a property that had been grazed a certain way for many years. There was nothing I could do as the rainfall reduced. All we could do really was reduce our livestock numbers to take the pressure off the country because I just had to accept what I'd inherited. From there, we've started to make some changes to the enterprise.
Yeah, you haven't accepted what you've received because you made some significant changes. The impression I get was that it was one large paddock, whereas you've come in and said, no, we need to, for want of a better description, divide it up so you can run it as a rotational grazing operation. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is. We were pretty much just one paddock. We actually had a very good fence that split the property north-south, but we had some paddocks around the house that had very good fencing as well. But pretty much the stock just ran over the whole property. And when the waters ran out, then they were moved to where there was water. But it was pretty much what you would call a set stocking operation. And so there was a lot of pressure around reliable watering points, and there was a lot of desertification happening around the station. So yes, you're right, Drew, I didn't accept the condition of the property. But there was a point where you look at the country and you just feel the desertification is occurring. So at that point, we decided to start making changes.
Well, let's talk about some of those changes. The first one, I think, would be the significant one in terms of infrastructure. You've actually turned around and said, we're going to divide this up. So what did you do?
We're in a situation where we'd been in a drought, a very severe drought, and it's always a big challenge to be coming out of a drought and have to find that extra revenue to start doing a lot of fencing. But I wanted to start somewhere. So what we did was patched up a 6-wire fence to the best we could, and keeping dorpers in is a challenge at the best of times, but put all the stock in one mob and put them in that area. And it was in 2020, so I was still in drought conditions, but we felt we had to start somewhere. We then applied for some assistance through Arid Lands South Australia through their Future Sustainability Program, and we were very fortunate to be awarded a grant which really did help us fast-track that process. With that grant, we put in 20 kilometres of fencing, and that really enabled us to get serious with it. We started in 2020. In January this year, in 2022, we put another 6 kilometres of fencing in. So we now have the property divided into 6 40,000 acre grazing areas, and we're just going through the full first cycle of rotational grazing.
You've shown me some photographs from the benefits of that, and unfortunately we can't share that on the podcast, but you're running, I understand, 3 months per paddock. The differences in those paddocks is remarkable. You've gone from bare sticks to very healthy looking landscape.
It is extraordinary. In 2 years, what has happened, and what I want to emphasise before we go into too much detail in this is that the rainfall that we've had for the last 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022, has only been average. So our 100-year average for Buckleboo is 322 millimetres. In 2020, we had 328 millimetres. 2021, we had 315, and we've had 300 millimetres for the year so far this year. So we have not had a big season, as is, 450 millimetres, which when you look through our records, it has happened in the past many, many times. We've been able to see this dramatic turnaround in the country in 2 years, and we've only had average rainfall. So I am very excited by the changes that I've seen happening on the property, but I really do attribute most of that change to the long rest period. So when I put the stock in an area, we graze an area for 3 months, and then by the time we get around, it's approximately 15 months complete rest. We are fortunate that kangaroo numbers have been dramatically reduced because of the drought. Sadly, a lot of them died, but in our case it was great because the numbers are dramatically reduced. We have excellent fencing now across the whole station, including very good boundary fencing. So our goat numbers are also reducing. We trap all our sheep. We basically sort of don't muster anymore. It's all done by trapping at the watering points. And so every time we muster sheep, we trap goats as well. We're keeping our goat numbers to an absolute bare minimum. And all of those things combined has seen the most extraordinary turnaround in the country. From those photos I showed you, Drew, yes, you can actually see extraordinary change in the landscape.
Central to all this, though, James, is this isn't a have-a-go show for you, because from speaking to you earlier, it starts with a plan, and you've been planning for the next drought. That's what I kind of get from you. Absolutely.
I feel that you can plan for the next drought. If I think the next major drought's going to be 29, 30, 31 or 30, 31, 32, the plan that I'm putting in place now is to ensure that we're ready, the station is ready, the watering points are ready, and that I want to see Buckleboo Station at its optimum as we enter that drought period.
In terms of making sure that everything is ready, you've been doing other infrastructure work as well, telemetry on the property. How important is that sort of infrastructure for managing the space properly?
It is really important. One of the things that I just feel that we need to do is utilise technology. Most of us are reducing our staffing numbers. In the case of Buckleboo, I'm pretty much there on my own, 250,000 acres. There's a lot of area to cover. In a traditional system, in the summer, you have to spend most of the day just driving around checking waters. It's a very inefficient use of time, but by putting cameras or telemetry and monitoring the watering points, it means that I know that there's water in the tanks, water in the troughs, and I don't have to go out and do that every day. We are now trialling using Wi-Fi towers around the property and going to the next level, which is installing cameras so that we can see what's happening. We're using soil probes across the property. The results that we're getting from that have been quite extraordinary, just to understand how much moisture profile we have down to a metre below the ground, how long it's retained in the soil, the salt content, all sorts of things. It tells us so much. We're now rolling that out, and we're going to have soil probes in all the different soil types so we can get a much better understanding of what's happening below the ground, so that helps us manage what's happening above the ground. And I can't stress enough that the technology that is out there needs to be adopted, because if you want to improve the efficiency of your operation, investing some money into that new technology just helps so much in improving efficiency and improving the data. The next level that we want to take this adoption of technology is satellite technology, so that we can monitor the changes that are happening in the landscape. This is commonly known as NDVI, Normalised Difference Vegetation Index. And we're just with Landscapes SA and through the National Drought Hub have happily volunteered to be part of a program using Chibo Lab, and we're willing to be part of that. We want to show that what we're doing is really happening, and it's going to allow me to probably try and achieve my target, which is having no bare ground. Now, no bare ground on a pastoral station is probably very ambitious, but I'm confident that we're going to get pretty close. And using that technology of satellite monitoring will allow us to monitor what is really happening.
Earlier on, you mentioned that you had some assistance with funding for fencing. Has there been any other areas that you've gained that sort of assistance with helping improve the property? Yes,
we have. We were very fortunate to be involved in the property management planning program, which again was conducted by Landscapes SA and the Arid Lands Building Sustainability Program. And that was a wonderful program to be involved in, because it just allowed us, everyone who was involved in it, to sit down, go through the process of planning, share your thoughts with other people, other pastoralists in the area. So there was about 6 in our group that went through. I think we all gained a lot from that. And so we're very grateful to be part of that program. On top of that, we had some assistance with infrastructure, with putting some fencing in. But I think with the planning process, we were very fortunate to be able to work with Richard Marver from Contour Consulting. Richard is a rangelands ecologist. So when I had my own business plan on the property, it was very much what I would call a very dry plan. And what Richard was able to do was to incorporate the ecology, the rainfall data, looking at the changes and plans for kangaroo management, goat management, erosion control on the property. So what we now have is a 110-page plan that is in great detail. It lists all the cause and effect of why we've lost a lot of our good native grasses. And we work with Richard. It's ongoing. We built a relationship with him. And we're most grateful for being part of that program as well.
James, do you see initiatives such as SA Drought Hub as being important mechanisms for helping producers and regional communities increase their resilience?
Absolutely, I do. One of the biggest gaps that I see probably across all of rural Australia is that ability to put together business plans, detailed plans, formal meetings within the family farm or the farming business. And that gap, I believe that someone like the Drought Hub has a role to play in that, encouraging farmers to use independent facilitators, people who have the skills to come onto the property and help them put together a business plan, help them work as a family. Like, just look at the family farming structure. Often you have the wives work off the farm. When it comes to running the farm, often they're not included in that planning process. And I think this is a big mistake. Even your employees, even your contractors, everybody that's involved in the farming business should be involved in the planning process. And when people are involved, they have ownership of the plan, they have ownership of the direction going forward. It is a huge gap in rural Australia. And if the Drought Hub could provide the assistance and the professional facilitators to pull that together, we're going to see a big shift in rural Australia. I can promise you that. The concept of planning future droughts, the concept of how a family works together in earning income off farm. If everybody, husbands, wives, contractors, everybody involved is involved in that process, you can move mountains. I also believe that when you have that plan, a detailed plan, not just something that you get a consultant to draw up and sits on the bookshelf gathering dust, a plan is something that everybody should be working to every day. And when you've got that detailed plan, talk to your accountant about it. Talk to your bank manager about it. Go in and sit down with them and say to them, we've decided we're going to make some changes to our enterprise and we want assistance. We want your help. And I'll tell you what, you'll get a good hearing from your bank if you do that. One of the areas I also see, another big area in gap and of data and information, is rainfall data. It's just too broad. We know in Australia we enjoy good rain in the coastal areas of Australia, Farming areas that are up to 200 kilometres from the coast always have pretty reliable rainfall. The rest of Australia is a very different story. If we had data that took our rainfall averages for each area back 100 years, 50 years is not enough, 20 years is not enough, believe me. You've got to go back 100 or even 200 years. If every farming enterprise knew what their 100-year average rainfall was, they would soon start working and understanding and working within reality. If you know what your 100-year average rainfall is, then you can start making those long-term planning decisions based around the reality of what your country can actually do. I honestly think that some bad decision-making that is done is just not understanding what your country really is capable of doing. And if you are in a 40 or 50-inch rainfall, a man-made drought can happen very quickly. You only need to have 3 months of delay in your normal rainfall pattern and bang, you're in trouble. So planning is absolutely critical. But from a farming point of view, having that data of long-term rainfall available for every district in Australia would be money well spent by a government or a national body.
Over the next year or 18 months, any major plans that you're going to be implementing on the property that's going to help with resilience?
Absolutely. The biggest area, of course, is our carbon project. We are very fortunate to have probably one of the largest carbon projects in South Australia has been approved by the regulators for Buckleboo Station. This has required change. Part of the change in grazing management is about regenerating the whole station. I'm not just looking at what's been approved by the regulators. Our target is to regenerate the whole station. That's everything, the grasslands, the bush country, and of course the trees that the regulators require for the carbon project. So there's enormous focus on that. It's a 25-year relationship. We're just starting that journey, and it's absolutely critical that we get that right. It's very important for the balance of the property. If we do it right and we respect that relationship, there'll be significant revenue from the carbon project. It's over 1 million tonnes of carbon sequestered over 25 years, so it will be a significant part of our revenue going forward into the future. So there's a lot of focus on our activities of ensuring that we work and build on that relationship. One of the things that I guess is a personal thing, but I want to prove that you can run a grazing enterprise side by side to a carbon project. In other words, we're not going to lock the country up. I want to keep running a sustainable grazing business, but it's all going to be through time control grazing. So it's not something it's set and forget. We have to work with our carbon providers, AI Carbon. It's essential that we have a good relationship. So one of the things that is going to be probably the biggest project is building a drought lot. We want to make sure that as one of the tools, I guess we have when we go into that next major drought, is that if the drought is very severe, for instance, we might only get 50 millimetres or 100 millimetres of rain for a year, and the country needs to be rested, then by having a drought lot in place or containment feeding area, I can take stock off the country and make sure that I retain all that good work that we're doing from now until when the drought hits. Because if we keep the ground cover and we keep our vegetation in order, when the rain does come, the country will recover quicker. So building this containment feeding project is something that is absolutely essential part of drought management.
Lastly, James, what would be a main message or two about building drought resilience that you'd like to pass on to others in low rainfall environments based on your experience? You
just can't ignore the importance of planning. I just can't stress this enough. I guess I'm not getting any younger. I am in my 60s, so I have seen a lot of farming operations over my lifetime of being in agriculture. And it just appears to me that there's a common message that we seem to talk about, that you're either in drought or recovering from drought or going into another drought. Drought seems to be something that consumes people's minds, and unfortunately it's sent a lot of farmers to the wall as well. If you have a very good plan and you commit yourself to that plan, and that plan's not just purely a business, it's your farm. I suppose you would call it a holistic approach towards planning is look at your vegetation, look at your soil. I mean, right across Australia, there's only one common denominator that we all have, and that's soil and soil management. So none of us have all the expertise. I mean, none of us have that package where we're ecologists, where we're business people, where we're accountants. I guess the message that I have is that get help. Seek help from people who live and breathe what they do. There's some excellent ecologists out there. I mean, these people have all the training. They understand the landscape, particularly in low rainfall areas, use rangelands ecologists. I mean, you will find you will learn so much about your country if you pull those people in and include them in that process. So when I'm talking earlier about planning and involving people in that planning process, I'm not just talking about the workers that work on the farm or the family members, but it's that expertise from outside of the farming business that can make a massive change.
James Kerr, you are making massive changes on Buckleboo Station. Thank you for taking the time and joining us for this Drought Hub podcast.
Thank you, Drew. It's been a pleasure.
And that concludes this podcast. You'll find more podcasts on the SA Drought Hub website at sadroughthub.com.au. The South Australian Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub is one of 8 hubs established across the nation through the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. The SA Drought Hub is an exciting initiative which brings together a dynamic network of primary producers, industry groups, researchers, government agencies, universities, agribusinesses, farming systems groups, traditional owners and others to work towards a common vision to strengthen the drought resilience and preparedness of farms and regional communities in SA. Led by the University of Adelaide in partnership with the Department of Primary Industries and Regions South Australia, the Hub is responsible for driving the extension of existing knowledge and practices to build drought resilience in primary production systems.